Vincent Zurzolo just sold the world's most expensive comic book for a record-breaking
A $15 million comic book has been sold for the first time.
My guest today is someone who turned his love for superheroes into a multi-million-dollar business. This comic introduced us to Superman, was owned by the actor Nicolas Cage, was stolen from his home, recovered, and then returned many years later.
Nick was a huge comic book collector. It was pretty great cop story.
Vincent is the man behind the largest comic book marketplace in the world and has gone from selling dollar comic books on the streets of New York to brokering the most expensive deals in the world.
I started from the bottom level. I was selling dollar comic books, and I moved my way up from there.
And in this episode, we go beyond the headlines. We unpack the investment side of comics, why pop cultural icons like Superman, Spider-Man, and Captain America continue to attract buyers and smash records.
So to be able to work my way up and compete against people who have had decades of more experience than I did was...
If you think that comic books are just childhood nostalgia, then stay tuned, because we're going to change your mind. Hi, Vincent.
Hey, Zaib, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Vincent, I have to start by congratulating you. You've been dominating the headlines. I've seen you everywhere talking about this incredible achievement. You guys have sold the most expensive comic book in the world, Action Comics #1, $15 million, the holy grail. Tell me how it feels.
It's pretty great. I remember back in 2010, 16 years ago, when I sold the first comic book for $1 million. That was a really big deal. The first time a comic book ever sold for 7 figures. And since then, there have been multiple sales, including many by my company, Metropolis Collectibles and ComicConnect, which is my auction company. When we sold the first book for $1 million, it was pretty special. Got a Guinness World Record and the whole 9 yards. This time around, it's been equally as special, if not more so, because it's the first 8-figure sale. A $15 million comic book has been sold for the first time. It's incredible. And what makes it even more special for me, if I think about it, is that I come from humble beginnings. I started from the bottom level. I was selling dollar comic books, and I moved my way up from there. In fact, when I graduated from university in 1993, I was actually selling comic books on the streets of New York City. So to be able to work my way up and compete against people who have had decades of more experience than I did was very exciting for me and very challenging for me. But of course, most importantly on this day, is talking about this Action Comics #1. Now, for those of you out there who don't know what Action Comics #1 is, it's the first appearance of Superman ever in a comic book, and Superman is the first superhero. This is from June of 1938. It is a comic book cover that people, whether they collect comic books or not, know it. It's Superman holding a big green car over his head, getting ready to throw it, and people running away. 10 cents was the original cover price. This book was sold by my partner in 1996 for what was then a record $150,000. And then 30 years later, $15 million. So we sold it back in 1996 to Nicolas Cage, the famous actor Nicolas Cage. Nick was a huge comic book collector. In fact, his last name is really Coppola, but he didn't want to make it on the merits of his family connections. So he changed his name to one of his favorite comic book characters, Luke Cage, Power Man, and used that last name. So Nick Cage is born, yeah. So then we have this sale to Nick, and in 2000, he had a Christmas party at his home. And unfortunately, somebody stole his Action Comics #1. And my partner and I helped with the investigation. And what ended up happening was the book was stolen. It wasn't the only one. There were several others that were stolen. My partner said to Nick at that time, said, one day these books will reemerge. And when they do, we're going to get them back for you. Proud to say, in 2011, we recovered Nick's book. And it was basically somebody had offered it to my company to sell it to us. And I won't bore you with all the details, but it was pretty, like a cop's a kind of great cop story. We went out with the detective. My partner met the seller, and when they realized it was definitely the book, the detective pulled out his card and said, "This is who I really am." And the guy's all the blood from his face just dropped out, and he looked like a ghost. Sadly
Did
for
you
him,
feel
he
like a
said he had.
superhero yourself at that moment? I bet you did.
My partner Steve was definitely.
Yeah.
But this guy said he had bought it from a storage unit, which we don't think was true, but who knows? They were asking, by the way, at that time, $1 million for the book. So we end up bringing the comic book to market after we recover it for Nick, and it ends up auctioning for what was then a record $2.2 million. That was the most expensive book at the time. It stayed in that collection for, 15 years. And here we are in 2026, excuse me. And we brought the book to market and sold it privately to a very avid comic book collector. And what's really beautiful about this story is both the buyer and the seller and the people in the middle, us, are all huge comic book fans. So this wasn't done by a massive corporation that was looking to hoard vintage collectibles or anything like that. This was done from and to passionate collectors. And yeah, it's an amazing feeling, and it is wonderful. And we did about 2-3 weeks of nothing but press and interviews and whatnot. And it's been really amazing.
How special. It's similar
Yeah.
to the story of the Mona Lisa, right? Like
It-
the fact that it's become so famous because of the tragedy behind it as well. The fact that it was
Yeah.
stolen, recovered, and the provenance and the history gives it this sexiness that helps
Sure.
elevate the price as well, right?
Sure. Now, the difference I would say between the Mona Lisa and Action Comics, number one, and please understand, I mean, no disrespect to Michelangelo or the Mona Lisa, Da Vinci or the Mona Lisa. The Mona Lisa, before it was stolen, was just another Da Vinci painting. It wasn't anything special. The fact that it was stolen and was laying under the bed of the thief for 2 years and then recovered is what brought world acclaim to that painting. Now, I would argue that Action Comics number one, whether or not it was stolen and whether or not it was owned by Nicolas Cage, is the most important comic book ever made, and Superman is the first superhero ever. And I would also argue, with less than 100 copies known to exist in the world, this is one of the most important pop culture or even cultural creations of the last century. Superman is nearing, in 2038 will be 100 years old. That's not that far off. That's 14 years from now. That's pretty incredible. So there's definitely similarities between the two, but there's also some differences. And again, I love Da Vinci, one of my favorite Renaissance painters, an incredible talent. But Mona Lisa, without that theft, is just another painting. Action one, either way, is still action one.
Yeah. And Superman, just as a character, I think transcends generations, transcends ideologies. I mean, I grew up with him. It was, for me, I saw myself in him. There were times where, you would look at this character and find so much solace in the fact that he fights for justice, he fights for equality, he fights for everybody.
Yeah.
What does Superman mean to you?
A lot of money. No, I'm just kidding. Well, what Superman means to me as a character. So I remember when I got out of university, I started learning more about the golden age of comic books, and I sat and I was reading golden age Superman comic books from the 1940s as I was buying them and realizing what an interesting character this was, because the golden age Superman was a little bit more lethal than our benevolent Superman today. I was one issue where he couldn't fly, by the way. He leaped tall buildings in a single bound, like the old television show would say.
I remember that from the TV show. Yeah.
Superman found that there was this dictator who was killing his own people, and he grabbed him and he jumped up into the sky, and he said, "You're never going to do this again to your people." And he let him go, and he killed him. And I was like, wow. that's not the Superman I grew up with. This guy's pretty interesting. In a certain way, Superman and many other comic books inspired me to create my own comic book, which I also want to plug a little bit. It's called The Addiction. So this
I
is my
love
comic book,
that. I
The
was going to ask
Addiction.
you about the addiction and the
Yeah.
fact that, this is your baby. Oh, it's gorgeous.
Yeah. So The Addiction is about this character. Her name is Dr. Nikki Tino. She is a doctor who's dedicated her life to fighting drug addiction. She's become so successful at it that the local mafia here in New York City puts a hit out on her. She's bad for business and they want her out of business. So they kidnap her, shoot her up with a cocktail of designer drugs, and leave her for dead. And she does die. But later, the chemicals mix with the blood in her body, bring her back to life. Now she's got a second chance at life and a very uncanny ability. From her slightest touch, she can inject any type of drug into a person's body. And thus begins the adventures of The Addiction.
Oh my God, Vincent, I have goosebumps. I expect a copy in the mail.
Yeah. And this is a comic book, by the way, that I created the concepts for back when I was 25 years old. I'll be 55 in April. And it took me a long time to actually bring this to market. And I did it back in 2023. We were very fortunate. Our first convention exclusive and then our series hitting the newsstands, we sold over 37,000 copies of the first 3 issues miniseries. And the reason I'm sharing this all with you guys is part of the reason Zaib asked me to be here is to talk about, the entrepreneur and what we try to set out and accomplish. And one of the best lessons I ever learned as a child was the lessons that I learned from my parents, who I would say that everybody out there, if you're trying to accomplish something, whether it's in the business world or whatever you're choosing, you have to find mentors to model yourself after. So it's very important to find those people that you aspire to be like, or that you have something great to learn from. Sometimes it's not easy to figure out who those people are. For me, it was very easy. I had 2 great parents who moved to the United States from Italy and lived the American dream. My father always said, knowledge is power. And my mother always said that anything you really want to do in life, you can accomplish it as long as you work hard at it. So I will never say I'm the smartest guy in the room. I'll never say I'm the guy with all the answers, but I am a very hardworking person. And when I latch onto something that I want, I do not give it up. So that's one thing I would also say to people out there. You have to follow your dreams. You have to follow your passions, but you also have to put a plan together on how you're going to accomplish these things. One of the things that I did very early on in my career is I set out with goals. Now, you can have short, medium, and long-term goals, and they can change over time, but it's great to write these things down. If you write something down, you're probably, they say, 70% more likely to actually follow through with them. So that's something I believe in wholeheartedly. I write down what my goal is, and I try to make it happen. So short-term goals, middle range goals, and long-term goals. Modeling after people that you admire. For me, there were several people. It was my parents. Another person I modeled myself after, who I never met personally, was Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was my first introduction to Eastern philosophy, and I studied his martial arts as a kid. And I tried to apply what he applied to martial arts to life in general. So I tried to take what he would say, absorb what is useful and discard what is not. That's one of the things I did. I also learned a lot from motivational speaker Anthony Robbins. I really, really loved the things he taught back in the 90s and incorporated that into what I was doing with my career. One of my main goals in my career was to become the biggest comic book dealer in the world. And this is something that was a very big goal, but how do you accomplish that when you're competing against people who have so much more experience, so much more money, so much more networking? What do you do? Where do you start? So I looked at what my parents did in the restaurant business. My father was not only a chef and restaurateur, but he was also a great host. When people walked into his restaurant, they felt like they were part of a family. My mother did the same thing when guests were invited into our home. They always felt welcome and always felt like they were treated like kings and queens. So in my business, I realized that one of the places where I could beat the competition was through customer service. And even to this day, I hope that people out there feel that when they call us up, they're getting great customer service. I believe my employees are extensions of me. So I look for people who hold those same type of values. Treat people with respect, no matter whether they're spending $50 or $15 million. Treat them with a type of care because eventually some of those people who spend 50 now could spend 15 million later. You never know what's going to happen to them in their lives. And also the fact that word of mouth is really important in a business's success, knowing that when you treat these people well, that eventually they're going to talk about you to other people, and hopefully in a good way, and it'll bring in more business. But I do think beyond whether or not it brings you in more business, it's just a matter of treating people with the way you want to be treated, courtesy and respect.
Yeah, and people remember that. They remember how you made them feel.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a question about your partner. You mentioned Steven Fischler,
Mm-hmm.
and you guys have been partners for 27 years. I think 27 years now.
This summer will be 27 years.
27. And we hear a lot of stories about people going into partnerships, but there are more stories of partnerships not working out versus partnerships working out. And I'm curious, when there is money and egos involved, how do you keep a partnership going for so long?
So one of the that's a great question, and one of the things I think it's really important is that a business partnership is very much like a marriage. And interestingly enough, our business partnership, our marriage, has lasted longer than both of our first marriages put together, which is very interesting. But one of the things I think that you have to keep in mind is even if you're fighting with somebody, even if you're arguing, nobody agrees on everything all of the time. Is that your prime goal? As long as you guys both have a similar goal in mind, it's okay to argue. It's okay to debate. It's okay to get heated. Things happen. People are people. People have egos or you just disagree. They have two different perspectives. And I think one of the things that has made our partnership so successful is that we complement each other very well. Steve is more behind the scenes. I'm more in front of the camera. Steve has certain strengths that I don't have. I have certain strengths that he doesn't have. Together, we are greater than the sum of our parts. And we are able to accomplish things that I don't think either one of us would have done by ourselves. So while it can get frustrating at times when you disagree or you believe very strongly in something, what I think one of the things to do is try to always remember you're on the same team. You're both have the same set of goals, or at least you should. And if you don't, then maybe you shouldn't be in the partnership together. And that's okay too, by the way. Partnerships are not for everybody. Some people want to be the boss and that's it. But I think the idea here is that you want to make sure you're happy, we're both working towards a similar goal, and that even at the end of the day, if you're arguing, fighting, and cussing, for me and Steve, we're like brothers. So there'll be times where we'll be in a knockdown, drag out disagreement, and one of us will text the other one, "I love you."
Yeah.
Kind of like, oh,
Who's
yeah, I
dad in
love
this
this guy. It's
equation?
okay.
But who's dad in this equation? Who breaks you up if it's getting too rough?
No. It's some. Listen, there's sometimes it's almost 27 years. There's sometimes you hang up the phone or hang up on one another or something like that, and you just don't want to talk, and you cool off a little bit. And when you
Yeah.
cool off, you realize, hey, maybe I was wrong, or I do feel very strongly. Let me go in a different way and try to explain myself in a different way. And look, again, you're not going to always agree. It's impossible. If you do, I don't know if that's the greatest partnership either, because one person
You
is
need people.
definitely
Yeah,
not.
you need someone to challenge you, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So we've come up with some great ideas lately, and working together, even on the $15 million sale, I would give most of the credit. Steve was the point man on that sale, but I was in the background giving him ideas on how to bring the two parties together and make the sale happen. So I think it was really it's really been wonderful to be able to be in a partnership and get things done that maybe we couldn't do by ourselves. Um, speaking of Superman, I wanted to share something else with you. So, by the way, everybody, we run auctions on ComicConnect. In fact, this very night, I don't know when you're going to watch this, but there might be an auction ending as we speak. This is Marvel Comics #1. This is the first Marvel comic book ever published. This book is graded at 2.5 on a scale of 1 to 10, meaning it's a low-grade copy, but more for technical reasons. When you look at this front cover, it's absolutely gorgeous. It looks much higher grade. So this is a knockout copy. First appearance of Human Torch. And what's even more interesting about this, you could say, without this book being published, there's never going to come a time where there's the first Spider-Man, Hulk, Fantastic Four, Avengers, X-Men. This is the start of what becomes Marvel Comics, and the title is Marvel Comics. There's the Human Torch on the cover. I'll show you a couple
Do we
other
know
books.
kind
Real
of
quick.
tentatively price points, Vincent? I know
This
it's an
book sold
auction, but
several years ago through our auction at $300,000.
okay.
What it'll sell for now? We hope more.
Yeah. Oh my God, how
I'll show you a couple
exciting.
more. This is from a collection from a collector friend of ours named Eric Groves. Eric was a comic historian, a passionate comic collector. He was in his 80s. Unfortunately, he passed this summer, and his partner, Mary, asked us to bring his collection to market. This is the highest graded copy of Detective Comics #1. It's from 1937 and predates Action Comics #1. This comic book is the highest graded, one of one, only one. And it's the only Golden Age comic book key that there is no copy 9 and above. So that's very important to give you an idea of rarity, scarcity. I held this book in my hands with no holder, and I've never seen colors like this on a copy of Detective Comics #1. And it's just a gorgeous copy. What's really interesting is you see D and C. That's where the DC and DC Comics comes from. It comes from Detective Comics #1.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. So this is a historically important and incredible book. Our estimate on this is somewhere between 400 and 500,000, but we've had collectors tell us they think this could sell for $1 million.
Okay, Vincent, so that brings me to my next question. These are astronomical numbers that you guys are hitting. Some of the, like, even if I just look at the Nick Cage numbers from the time between when he bought it to now, that's gone up by like more than 1,000% appreciation.
Thousand times, yeah.
More than 1,000. That's better than any stock exchange has performed. Are comic books a better investment than perhaps the stock exchange?
Well, here's what I would tell you. I don't have a crystal ball, but I have 40 years of experience in the comic book business. I believe the first thing to do in terms of investing in comic books is to remember that this is a mid to long-term investment. You're not going to always see those massive returns in the first 3 years. Sometimes you will, but more times than not, you have to be willing to hold. I've held many comic books for multiple years, decades, and been very happy that I did. And you can invest, you don't have to spend $15 million to be an investor in comics. I have customers who have budgets of, I spend $1,000 a year, 10,000, 50,000, whatever. But it could even be in the hundreds. Now, buying comic books that have some legs to them in terms of being around for a long time, I think is the better way to go than buying something that's brand new. Brand new comic books can sometimes fluctuate as fads, except for my comic book, The Addiction. Just
I
kidding.
was just going to say that.
I'm going to show you a couple of other really cool books to kind of punctuate the importance and value of these pop culture relics. Here's the first appearance of Captain America in Captain America Comics #1 from 1940.
Wow.
There he is knocking out Adolf Hitler on the cover.
Vincent, what happens if I find this in my basement? Let's say I'm going through my stuff, right? It could happen. Like I find a comic book.
The most important thing is to contact an expert like myself. We can give you an idea as to what they're worth. We can tell you how to maximize value on the book, how to get it graded. We can get them graded for you. There are a lot of different ways to really make sure you're getting the most out of the comic book when you bring it to market. Our goal, because when we take consignments from people, we become partners in a sense. is to get you as much money as humanly possible because that gets us the best commission. If you're just looking to sell comic books, we have millions of dollars at our disposal to buy comic books. And we buy comic books every day.
Let's say I find a comic book. I think it's worth money. What is the one thing you're like, please don't do that? Like, do it the right way.
Don't throw it across the room. I'll tell you a quick story. Years ago, this guy bought a house in Minnesota, and he started doing renovations on it. And he broke down a wall and found pages of an Action Comics #1 in it. And he kept it. The more he broke down the wall, the more pages he found. He put together what was an Action Comics #1. One day, his sister-in-law kept nagging him, saying, you really should find out what this thing is worth. And he got so annoyed, he threw it across the room. Oh my God. At the time, the tear that he caused that ran 3/4 of the back cover cost him what I believe was somewhere between $50,000 to $75,000 in value. By today's standards, it's probably, that could be $300,000-$400,000.
Yeah.
So don't throw your comic books. Treat them very carefully, gingerly. Make sure that they're handled with care.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you a couple more quick books that'll be coming up for auction. What's that?
Yeah. I think it's important to know what to do, but also what not to do. Because sometimes we're just like, yeah, okay, it's not worth money. But I know that we're short on time. I had 2 more questions for you, but I want to see what you have for us first.
Yeah. I'm going to show you a couple more things. I'm happy to answer as many questions as you have. This is the first appearance of Spider-Man. It's also going to be in the auction. I thought people would get a kick out of seeing it. He first appears in a comic book called Amazing Fantasy, and its issue number is 15. Originally, the series was called Amazing Adult Fantasy, issues 1 through 14. They were trying to appeal to an adult audience. It didn't work out very well, and they were finishing up the series. And they said, let's take the adult off and just call it Amazing Fantasy. And all the stories before this were about monsters and science fiction. Let's introduce a new superhero. And here he is, Spider-Man, who is quite possibly, quite arguably, the most popular superhero in the world. Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, depending on the year, depending on the movie that's out, those are your 3 most famous characters. And here's a 5.5 copy. This copy should sell for somewhere around $60,000 to $70,000. I don't want to keep talking about me or comic books. Tell me what other questions you have. I'm happy to answer.
Well, I got 2 more. And these are more questions for me. So the first question is, if you were stranded on a deserted island and could only bring 1 comic book, 1 person, and 1 item, what would it be? And the person cannot be your wife.
Darn, that was my first answer.
Or Stephen.
Okay. So the comic book I'd want to bring with me to read, I want to bring a really long comic book. Can it be a graphic novel?
Of course it can.
Okay. I would want to bring the Walking Dead compendiums 1, 2, and I think there's a third one, because that is one of the greatest stories I've ever read. And I love the fact that it's so effective in black and white, and it's just an amazing comic book. So Walking Dead would be my choice because it's one thing I know is like just chock full of issues and stories, and it's just wonderful.
Even for a deserted island?
Yeah.
Or you're the only one there?
No, maybe not a good choice, right? The zombie's going to get me. What was the second thing was what? The person?
A person and then an item.
A person. Well, I'd want somebody who knows how to survive on an island. And I have a very good friend who I met when I was 19 years old, and he was just joining the military at that time. We only hung out for a summer, but we've been lifelong friends since. His name is John, and John is a survivalist. This guy knows exactly how to survive in any type of situation. I wouldn't have a clue. This guy would get us through it. We would either be able to live on that island or we'd get saved because of him. That's my choice.
Fantastic choice.
And was there a third question on that?
Yeah, an item.
Item. I think the most important item would probably be a tarp. Can collect rainwater and you can keep yourself dry and out of the sun.
Those are so far the best answers I've heard.
My second item would be tape, because you can do a lot with tape, and I'm not too good with like weaving stuff. So I'd want some.
You didn't say knife. Like for me, when I do this for myself, I always think, I would bring a knife because how will you?
Yeah.
But anyway, it just it's funny the answers you get.
I read this one thing that said like pick 10 things from this, and I picked them, and then I said to John, what would you pick? And I remember him saying something about a tarp. Because you could collect rainwater in a tarp, and so I think that would be really cool. Yeah.
And then my last question is, life isn't scripted, but if your life were a movie and we were writing a script for it, what would it be called?
Wow, nobody has ever asked me that question. The Adventures of Vincent Zurzolo. I don't know.
I love that.
Did you know that the original title for Star Wars is supposed to be The Adventures of Luke Skywalker?
Ironically, I did know that.
Yeah, and that's why I chose
I'm a
that.
big fan. I am a very big fan. On a
Yeah.
side note, by the way, who is your favorite actor that's played Superman?
Christopher Reeves.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
was a Superman on and off the screen. Really, there is nobody else who has embodied, for me, that
I've
character.
heard. I watched the documentary, and then I actually talked to people who knew him and said he wasn't always the nicest guy in the world. And I was like,
Come
oh, that's
on,
interesting. Yeah,
stop
from
it.
people who,
Really?
yeah. So, but you know what? He was my Superman. That's, and by the way, and I love everybody else who's played Superman, even the new guy, David Corenswet. So I think he's wonderful. But yeah, I love Christopher Reeve.
Yeah,
That first movie I remember as a child.
Oh,
Yeah.
have you not watched it? There's this clip on, I think keeps getting repeated on my algorithm on Instagram about how he changes when he puts on the glasses, and then his whole posture changes and his voice changes, and you hear this little crack in his voice.
Yeah.
He brought so much to that character. I think it was the first time I'd seen sort of an actor from that time go into character development, and there's footage of him asking the director about, well, what is my motivation? And, things like that. And he was young. When he started, he wasn't that old.
He was unknown.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was also Juilliard trained. He was a very well-trained actor, and his roommate was Robin Williams.
Again, that documentary was so eye-opening and so sad. I felt that it was very emotional, and there was just so much depth to this man's life.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Tragic, but, inspirational, and he got to live quite an incredible life.
Yeah. Did you ever meet Stan Lee, by the way?
Yeah, I've met Stan Lee multiple times, and I interviewed him twice on my radio show, ComicZoneRadio.com. He was incredible, and there's a lot of controversies about Stan Lee for a lot of different reasons, but I'm going to focus on what my experience was, because I think that's the most important thing. I can't not like somebody for something they did maybe to somebody else or whatever. So I just judge people on my experiences, and Stan was always gracious with his time. He was always very kind to me. And I think without him, maybe I would never have gotten into comic books, because I loved comic books. And I think a large part of that was because of his guiding hand as a publisher, as an editor, at Marvel Comics. And his early creations, whether, with Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko and other creators, were really incredible creations. And he can't be minimized, his contribution to the art form.
Yeah. Are you a Marvel fan or a DC fan?
I love both, but I am a Marvel fan at heart. I love Spider-Man's my favorite character. When I created The Addiction, a lot of what I learned about what makes a comic book character great were inspired what I brought into The Addiction.
That is so fantastic. Vincent, thank you so much for your time. I can't wait to read Addiction. I feel like I'm becoming a super fan because I'm such a fan of your work. So this is an extension.
Thank you.
I look forward to you setting some new world records at your upcoming auctions. So I will be keeping an eye out, and maybe I'll be bidding on some of the smaller lots. Who knows?
Oh, wow. That'd be great. We'd love that.
You've inspired me.
Yeah, we need more women collectors. Yeah.
All right. Keep an eye out for me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time, Vincent. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on your show. I wish you the best with your series. And to everybody out there, please, if you have a dream, there's something you love, put a plan together. Get to work on it. don't let your life go by without following your dreams, because sooner or later you're going to be sitting there going, oh my, I had a chance and I didn't follow it.
Wise words
That's
to
my,
live
yeah.
by. Thank you,
All right.
Vincent.
Take care. Thanks.